Sarah's hands trembled as she turned the yellowed pages of her grandmother's photo album, each crinkle echoing in the silent attic, where dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through a small window. The musty scent of old paper and forgotten memories filled her nostrils as she worked through boxes of family memorabilia, a task she'd been avoiding since the funeral 3 weeks ago. 18 years had passed since the Hartwell family reunion that changed everything, yet the images still haunted her dreams with crystalline clarity. She paused at a group photo from that July afternoon. 37 smiling faces gathered on the sprawling lawn of the old farmhouse, everyone dressed in their summer best. Her younger self stood in the back row, pigtails askew, chocolate ice cream staining her yellow sundress. Aunt Marie held baby cousin Emma, who couldn't have been more than 6 months old then. Uncle Jim's arm was wrapped around his wife's shoulders, both of them still blissfully unaware that their marriage would crumble under the weight of what was to come. But Sarah's eyes weren't drawn to the joyful expressions or the picnic tables laden with Grandma's famous potato salad and Uncle Pete's barbecued ribs. Instead, they fixed on something she'd never noticed before, a shadowy figure lurking at the edge of the frame, partially hidden behind the ancient oak tree, whose sprawling branches had provided shade for generations of Hartwells. The twins, Michael and Matthew, had been 7 years old when they vanished that day, identical in every way except for a small scar above Michael's left eyebrow from a bicycle accident the previous summer. Sarah remembered how they'd argued that morning over who got to wear the blue baseball cap, with the Red Sox logo eventually settling on matching caps so neither would feel left out. One moment they were playing hide-and-seek with the other children, their identical laughter ringing across the property as they darted between the old apple trees and the weathered barn. She could still hear Matthew's voice calling out, "Ready or not, here we come," in that sing-song way children do. The next moment, they were gone without a trace, leaving behind only those matching baseball caps abandoned near the creek that ran along the property's eastern border. The search had lasted for weeks. FBI agents tramped through the woods with cadaver dogs. Volunteers from 3 counties formed search lines that stretched for miles. Helicopters circled overhead while divers explored every pond and stream within a 50-mile radius. But the boys had simply vanished, as if the earth had swallowed them whole, leaving behind a family torn apart by grief, suspicion, and the kind of desperate hope that slowly transforms into acceptance and then into a wound that never quite heals. Sarah adjusted the desk lamp, its harsh white light creating stark shadows across the photograph. The figure was barely visible, but something about the posture, hunched forward slightly, hands clasped behind the back, and the way the person seemed to be watching the children rather than participating in the festivities, sent ice water through her veins. It was the stance of someone observing, calculating, waiting for the right moment. She grabbed her grandmother's magnifying glass, the same one the old woman had used for her crossword puzzles and needlework, and peered closer. The image was grainy, slightly out of focus, but as she adjusted the angle and squinted through the lens, the features became clearer. The prominent nose, the receding hairline, the particular way he held his left shoulder slightly higher than his right, an old injury from his army days, he'd always claimed. "Jesus Christ," she whispered, the words hanging in the dusty air like an accusation. "Uncle Robert." Her father's older brother by 3 years, the man who had organized the search parties with military precision, barking orders at volunteers and coordinating with law enforcement. He'd been the one who comforted Aunt Marie when she collapsed at the creek bank where the caps were found, holding her as she screamed the boys' names until her voice gave out. He'd been the pillar of strength when everyone else crumbled, taking charge of meal trains for the distraught parents, managing the media interviews, even hiring a private investigator when the official search was called off after 6 weeks. Robert had been the one to suggest the reward fund, contributing the first $1,000 from his savings. He'd printed flyers with the boys' school photos, Michael grinning with his 2 front teeth missing, Matthew serious and thoughtful, and posted them at truck stops and rest areas across 3 states. For months, he'd fielded tips and false leads, driving hundreds of miles to investigate reported sightings that inevitably led nowhere. The same man who now lived alone in that very farmhouse where the reunion had taken place, having inherited it after Grandma's death last month, when the old woman finally succumbed to the pneumonia that had been slowly weakening her lungs for the past 2 years. Robert had moved in immediately, claiming he wanted to preserve the family homestead, to keep it ready for when the boys finally came home. Everyone had thought it was touching, if somewhat obsessive after all these years. Sarah's phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "Don't forget to grab the last of Grandma's things before Robert sells the house. He wants everything cleared out by weekend." The coincidence felt like destiny, or perhaps a warning. Sarah had planned to make one final trip to the farmhouse anyway, but now she had a purpose beyond sentimentality. She photographed the album page with her phone, her heart hammering as she zoomed in on Robert's half-hidden face. The expression was unmistakable, cold calculation masked by familial concern. 3 hours later, Sarah's car crunched over the gravel driveway of the Hartwell farmhouse. The 2-story colonial looked exactly as it had 18 years ago. White paint, peeling slightly, green shutters faded by decades of sun and storms. Robert's truck wasn't in the driveway. He'd mentioned something about driving into town for supplies when she'd called to arrange the visit. The spare key was still hidden under the ceramic frog by the front porch, a family tradition that now seemed ominously careless. Sarah let herself in, breathing in the familiar scent of old wood and lavender sachets. Grandma's presence lingered in every corner, from the doilies on the end tables to the collection of porcelain birds on the mantelpiece. But Sarah wasn't here for nostalgia. She moved with purpose toward the basement door, remembering how Uncle Robert had always been quick to redirect the family away from certain areas during visits. "Grandma's getting old," he'd say. "Some rooms aren't safe anymore." The basement stairs groaned under her weight, each step producing a different pitch, like the keys of some macabre piano. She pulled out her phone's flashlight, casting stark shadows across the stone foundation walls that her great-grandfather had laid with his own hands back in 1923. The beam revealed the detritus of 8 decades, boxes of Christmas decorations with faded labels in her grandmother's careful script, old furniture shrouded in sheets that looked like sleeping ghosts, a collection of paint cans arranged with military precision against one wall, typical of Robert's obsessive organization. The ancient furnace hummed in the corner, its steady rhythm oddly comforting in the oppressive silence. But there was something else, something that made her skin crawl with a primitive fear she couldn't quite identify. The air felt different here, charged with secrets and suffering in a way that made her want to turn around and flee back up those stairs. At first glance, it looked like any other basement in any other old house, but Sarah had learned to notice details in her work as a crime scene photographer, shadows that fell wrong, spaces that didn't quite make sense, the subtle signs that someone had been trying to hide something. Then she saw it. Behind the furnace, partially concealed by what appeared to be a false wall, was a small door, child-sized, Sarah's breath caught as she noticed the scratches around the lock, fresh scratches, as if it had been opened recently. Her hands shook as she tried the handle, locked, but the wood around the latch was old and soft. A few determined pushes with her shoulder, and the door splintered open. The smell hit her first, not decay, but something else. Childhood, crayons and juice boxes, and that particular scent of little boys who'd been playing outside. Sarah's flashlight revealed a small room, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, with 2 tiny beds pushed against opposite walls. The sheets were faded but clean, as if someone had been maintaining this space. On a small shelf between the beds sat 2 baseball caps, the same ones Michael and Matthew had been wearing the day they disappeared. Sarah stumbled backward, her phone clattering to the floor. In the darkness she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway above. Robert was home. Her mind raced as she grabbed her phone and took rapid photos of the room, the beds, the caps. Evidence. She needed evidence. But as footsteps crossed the floor above, she realized she needed something more immediate. Escape. The basement had 1 window, high and narrow, but large enough for her to squeeze through if she could reach it. Sarah stacked boxes beneath it, her movements frantic, as Robert's voice called down from upstairs. "Sarah, that you, honey? Saw your car outside?" She didn't answer, focusing on the window latch. 18 years of paint and rust made it nearly impossible to open, but desperation gave her strength. Finally it gave way, and she hauled herself up and through, emerging into the side yard just as she heard Robert's heavy footsteps on the basement stairs. Sarah ran to her car, fumbling with the keys, as Robert appeared in the basement window she'd just escaped through. Their eyes met for a moment, his wide with shock and something else, recognition. He knew that she knew. The car roared to life, and Sarah sped down the gravel drive, her phone already dialing 911 before she reached the main road. 911. What's your emergency? I found them, Sarah gasped into the phone. The twins who disappeared 18 years ago. They're in my uncle's basement. He's been keeping them. The operator's professional calm wavered. Ma'am, are you saying you found missing children who disappeared 18 years ago? Are they still alive? Sarah's mind reeled. Were they? The room had been maintained, but she hadn't seen the boys themselves. The caps, the beds, the childlike scent. It all suggested ongoing occupancy. But by whom? The twins would be 25 now, grown men, unless... I don't know, she whispered. But there's evidence, a hidden room. You have to get there before he destroys it. Within an hour, police cars surrounded the farmhouse. Sarah waited at the end of the driveway, watching as officers led Robert away in handcuffs. His face was blank, emotionless, but his eyes found hers as he passed. There was no remorse there, only the cold fury of someone whose carefully constructed world had finally collapsed. Detective Martinez approached her, notebook ready. We found the room you described. You're right, it shows signs of recent use, but no current occupants. What about Robert? What's he saying? Nothing yet, but we found something else. The detective's expression was grim. A journal, detailed entries going back 18 years. He documents everything, their routines, their growth, their adaptation to captivity. Sarah felt sick. They were alive all this time. According to the entries, yes, until recently. Martinez paused, choosing his words carefully. The last entry is dated 3 months ago. It mentions graduation day and new beginnings. We think he may have released them, but we're not sure why or where they might be. The investigation consumed the following weeks. Robert's journal painted a disturbing picture of methodical, psychological manipulation. He'd convinced the twins that their family had abandoned them, that he was their protector in a dangerous world. He'd educated them in his own twisted way, creating a relationship that was part father figure, part captor. But the journal also revealed something unexpected, genuine affection. Robert's entries showed real concern for the boys' well-being, pride in their achievements, even love, though love filtered through the lens of someone deeply disturbed. It wasn't the cold calculation of a typical predator, but something more complex and ultimately more tragic. The breakthrough came when Sarah received an unexpected phone call. "Is this Sarah Hartwell?" The voice was male, nervous, unfamiliar. "Yes. I saw the news. About Uncle Robert. About what they found." A long pause. "My name is Michael. Michael Hartwell." Sarah's world tilted. "Michael? I know this is difficult to believe. Matt's here with me. We've been trying to figure out how to contact the family for months, ever since Robert told us the truth. The truth. That he took us. That our real family had been looking for us. He said he was dying, that he couldn't live with the secret anymore. He gave us money, identification papers he'd somehow obtained, and told us we were free to go. But Sarah..." Michael's voice broke. "We didn't know how to explain 18 years of absence. We didn't know if anyone would believe us, or if they'd even want us back." The reunion took place at the police station, with counselors and social workers present to help navigate the impossible complexity of the situation. Sarah waited in a small conference room, her parents beside her, as the door opened and two men entered. They were unmistakably the twins, though transformed by adulthood. Same dark hair, same green eyes, but their faces bore the subtle marks of psychological trauma, a hypervigilance in their posture, a careful distance they maintained from strangers. Yet beneath it all, Sarah could still see echoes of the 7-year-old boys who had vanished so long ago. "Michael, Matthew..." Their mother's voice was barely a whisper. The twins exchanged a glance, that silent communication identical twins share, before Michael stepped forward. "Mum." The word hung in the air like a bridge across 18 years of grief. Their mother rose slowly, as if afraid that moving too quickly might make them disappear again. When she finally embraced them, the sound of her sobbing filled the room. Sarah watched through her own tears as her family began the impossible process of healing. There would be challenges ahead, therapy, legal proceedings, the slow work of rebuilding relationships that had been severed in the most traumatic way possible. The twins would need time to adjust to a world that had moved on without them, to reconcile the family they remembered with the people they'd become. But in that moment, watching her cousins hold their mother for the first time in 18 years, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected: gratitude, not for the tragedy itself, but for the strange chain of events that had led to this reunion. Her grandmother's death, the photo album, even her own curiosity, all had conspired to bring them home. Robert died in custody 3 months later, a heart attack that the doctors said was likely brought on by stress. Sarah felt neither joy nor sorrow at the news, only a hollow sense of completion. He'd taken 18 years from her family, but in the end, he'd also given them back. The twins never spoke publicly about their experience, and the family respected their privacy. They attended therapy, found jobs, slowly built lives in the world they'd been stolen from. Michael became a librarian, finding solace in books and quiet spaces. Matthew chose carpentry, creating beautiful things with his hands, as if to counteract the destruction that had shaped his life. At the next family reunion, the first in 19 years, they gathered again at a different location, away from the farmhouse that held too many ghosts. As Sarah watched her cousins interact with nieces and nephews who had been born in their absence, she marveled at their resilience. During a quiet moment, Michael approached her. "Thank you," he said simply, "for looking, for not giving up." "I should have looked sooner," Sarah replied. "I should have noticed that shadow in the photograph years ago." Michael shook his head. "We weren't ready years ago. We had to grow up first, had to become people who could handle the truth. Maybe this is exactly when it was supposed to happen." Sarah considered this as she watched Matthew teach her daughter how to throw a baseball, his patient coaching echoing across the lawn. Perhaps there was wisdom in his words, or perhaps it was simply the human need to find meaning in senseless tragedy. Either way, they were home now, scarred but whole, forever changed, but somehow stronger for having survived the darkness. The photo album that had revealed their secret was destroyed in the investigation, but Sarah didn't need pictures to remember this moment. The sound of her cousin's laughter, genuine and unguarded for the first time in 18 years, was a photograph her heart would never lose.